Yeah, I'll be back at 6.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
Good evening. On behalf of KZF Design, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. This is a very interesting, very exciting project. It's a project that we've got a lot of interest in. My name is Mark Shoemaker. I'm the project. I'll be the project manager, project director of public facilities for KZF Design. I'll be working with you from the very beginning as we go through programming and conceptual design, all the way through the day you move into the building. With me tonight is David Ross. He's our director of design. He'll be leading the efforts on the design of the building. And also, as the project moves through construction documents, he stays involved to ensure that we're meeting the design objectives of the project. Eric Anderson's with me tonight. Eric's a planner with our company. I think some of you are familiar with him already. He's been very helpful in helping Dave and myself know a little bit more about Dave and become a little more attuned to the needs of the project and some of the nuances with Dayton, Kentucky. With that, our presentation tonight has 3 parts. We're going to go quickly through some from experience and additional information that was not necessarily included in the submittal that we gave you to expand on our experience. Then we're going to talk about your project and our project approach and concepts that we've already looked at, and then obviously turn it over for you for questions and answers. Again, our team, KZF Design, is a full-service architectural engineering firm. We have mechanical, structural, civil engineering, electrical engineering, all in-house in addition to architectural. But we've also included cardinal engineering and human nature on our team. It's basically continuing a team that's been working with the City of Dayton for a number of years now on the riverfront master plan project as well as the bike trails project. So we felt it was important to keep that strong team together as we move forward with the project. KZF, as I think you're aware, is a local firm. We're not local to northern Kentucky. We're right across the river. Sometimes people think it's kind of like the Atlantic Ocean, but we're only 10 minutes away. We can be here on a heartbeat. We were able to get here pretty quick tonight when we found out there was an opportunity to move up. I think we've got until 8:15, I guess. But in addition to the local experience or local service that we bring to the project, we're also bringing to you some pretty strong national public safety design experience. Dave and myself, through projects at KZF, as well as a former relationship with another firm in Cincinnati, we've done over 100 public safety projects around the country. These include police stations, combination police administration buildings like your project, fire stations, and so on. These include build projects as well as a number of studies that we've done over the years. A lot of them local to the Ohio and northern Kentucky area. Some of these I'll talk about here in a minute. And some of these across the country, teamed with other architects as well. To expand a little bit on the experience that the projects that we showed in the proposal we submitted, I wanted to share a few projects that Dave and I had experience with, again, with a previous firm. But these are projects I think have some relevance to your project. These projects, left to right, is the Deer Park Police Administration Building in Ohio, the Evendale City Administration Building, again, Police and Administration, and Amberley Village. The Deer Park project here, I think, has some very significant relevance. Again, it's a combination of police and administration in a new building. All of these communities were outgrowing the usefulness of their existing facilities, needing new facilities. This particular building, Deer Park, was built right next to, basically as an expansion of a city park. It included a community room for community use, and also included public restrooms that served the park. So it's kind of enhancing and kind of expanding on some green space that was already there in Deer Park. Next slide are 3 projects that also I think are relevant. On the left is the Monroe City Administration Building, again combining police and administration. The middle one is Pickwa's municipal building, again, combination of police and administration. And then one on the right you may be familiar with is Independence, Kentucky, again, combination of police and administration. Significant feature on all three of those projects is the way the projects handled, it basically created a public space where there really wasn't a public space before. With your project, there already is a public space, and the idea, and as Dave will talk about it here in a minute, is to try to enhance that public space, preserve that public space, and develop, potentially develop the project around that public space. In these three projects, the public space really didn't exist. It was created as part of the project. I want to talk real quick before I turn it over to Dave about our process. We have a process that we use that Dave and I have honed over the last 20 years. It's a very interactive process, the way we work with our clients. We're starting with questionnaires to be able to get a lot of good, useful information on how you work and what your needs are before we even have the initial kickoff meeting. Go through a process of programming using room diagrams. We even develop these sometimes as three-dimensional diagrams, as well as room data sheets where we collect a lot of information about the specific spaces and the equipment needs, furniture needs, how many people are going to accommodate. The critical part of this is we've developed a lot of hard data early on in the project, so we right-size your project. The rooms aren't too big, they're not too small. We're anticipating future needs as well as meeting your current needs. It's important, and we test that against a budget. Once we determine a preliminary program size or a building size, we test that against historical cost data to make sure that we stay within your budget. The last thing you want to do is to put a project out to bid and find out you're over budget. So we're looking at budget from the very beginning. And like I said, we're trying to right-size the project. We're very pragmatic. It's important not only to make sure the room is big enough to fit the needs, but it's also just as important not to make it too big. You're paying for spaces you're not needing or not using. So the idea is to right-size the project. We provide practical, very pragmatic solutions to our projects, but also fit them within the urban context or whatever the context is for the specific project, the specific client. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
Great. Thank you again. It's great to be here, and it's nice to meet everyone. We couldn't help but when we get the RFP for the project and take a look at the site. First of all, I don't believe you could probably, my opinion, wouldn't be able to pick a better site for your project. Is one of these the pointer?
Yeah. The one on the top.
Okay, the location of the site, I think, very strategic at the kind of intersection of your main kind of thoroughfares, and even if you look at the general organization of, I realized at one time this was a town, the grid that stays kind of parallel with the river here, and then it turns this way, and then this whole center in the middle, it seems to be most of your public spaces, or a lot of public facilities and green space in this area. So we got 6th Avenue, and then There it is, thank you. Sorry, I got it written on my cheat sheet over here. We understand from working on the Riverfront Master Plan that the intention is for a connection here. So you're right, at where the connection accessing the sort of the middle zone of the riverfront development, and right at the kink of 6th Street is you at the end of the business district. Imagine the walkable sort of 2 to 3 story scale that you currently have here, and as you were to approach the site from the west, it just kind of avails itself to you at the kink of the road. So, I mean, I really do think it's a very strategic, awesome location. A little close-up of the site, again, you have St. Bernard Church right here, so again, another sort of iconic, sort of a public-like, kind of a facility. You've got the schools back here. You have the memorials, a pair of memorials. This one dates back to like 1919, I believe, and then the one that was added more recently. Obviously, those need to be either retained or incorporated in some way into the project. And I know the green space is also an issue. So there's a desire for combination of some green space as well as the building. So again, we haven't had the opportunity yet to really to work with you guys and get initial sort of kind of feedback or whatever, but we kind of couldn't help ourselves to at least start to kind of to test, how you may respond to the site with the program of the building. So we did sort of 4 quick little massing studies. These are done really quick. Looking at, and again, we've done buildings like this before where, maybe this space really it's reinforced as a public space. Most important public structures, at least a lot of them, have kind of, a forecourt. They have kind of a, an outdoor room, sort of an outdoor public space, flagpoles, landscape sort of, gathering. You can imagine a memorial, the one memorial can stay here. So this, I call this concept 1, some amount of parking, imagine maybe administration is on one side and the police is on the other. Maybe there's a common entry that, has, kind of shared spaces. Maybe this is sort of glass lobby. So we're showing some green space in front as well as some green space in the back, and then wrapping parking. You're going to need some parking for the police department. So we just kind of took a stab. This is like a 2-story scale, which seems to feel good on the site. This is a kind of a plan of that. So it shows where you can have some green space in the front. You can have some sort of in the back. Imagine this is sort of a lobby that maybe is a kind of a pass-through. Maybe there's glass on the front and back. So you can really start kind of engaging the site, and maybe that's one memorial stays back there and the other one's up here, and then the parking kind of wraps around, and you kind of hold this, kind of create that space up on 6th Avenue. So I call this one concept 2, probably the most urban of the little scenarios I looked at, and said, okay, maybe instead of having a big space in front, you really try and hold the street edge, and you hide all the parking. So in this particular scenario, the building is brought up to the street. So again, it's sort of, it contributes to the feel and the scale of 6th Avenue as it is now. Kind of wrap the parking around. Maybe you'd still carve out a little bit for an entry on the corner. And again, I keep thinking, driving down, 6th, and then all of a sudden you get to this intersection, and then the building is just right smack in front of you. So that's sort of one approach where, again, I would say that one is the most sort of urban approach. In this scenario, you probably can keep the one memorial out here, and maybe you develop in this one a larger, almost a pocket park. This could be considered almost a sort of a surprise. You don't know it's there maybe until you pass through the building, or you provide access around the building to that sort of green space. But again, in this scenario, the building is much more part of the urban scale of the street. This is a concept, it's called Concept 3. This is kind of, maybe there's a memory of when this part of 6th Avenue actually went straight through. Maybe there's, you hold that edge, and it's just another way of looking at it. It allows, you maintain the corner sort of as it is. Maybe it's enhanced, additional green space. It's, redesigned a bit. So this one just sort of plays up on that, the 6th Avenue, kind of the old road alignment that used to go through there. And this one is the last one. So I sort of say here, what if you tried to really maximize the green space in front of the building? How would you do that? So this particular concept has the largest amount of space in front of the building. So I had plenty of room to incorporate both memorials, monuments, some convenience parking here, and then it wraps a bit around the back. And again, this is all, I had to mention that ahead of time, this is all completely without having to have the opportunity to have some conversations with you, or not just kind of initial sort of, impressions. So I think that's all we got. So we're open for questions. Try to keep it for 10 minutes, and then go over to it. Thank you.
Okay, first question, and anybody on the team can feel free to take the questions as they come, wide-ranging. But first question, what is your projected timeline for the three services, design, bidding, and construction that you all pursue? This is assuming that we would get started with some initial meetings in February.
Yeah, pardon me a minute, I've got the proposal over here. We had put a timeline in the proposal. And the timeline we put in here is typical. Typically, our experience is you can work through this programming phase within one and a half to 2 months in terms of getting through the programming, initial and schematic design. Again, a lot of that is dependent on your availability to be able to meet with us, get questionnaires back, and go through that programming process. Part of that process will also include touring your existing facilities, getting a good feel of how you operate now, where your deficiencies are, and kind of building off of that. And then once we move into final design development, which you're taking that schematic design, going through and developing systems, and then moving into construction documents, that's another 5 months to complete construction documents. So we're looking at a time frame of about 6 to 7 months to get the project to a point where we could put it out to bid. 6 to 8 months I'm very comfortable with that kind of a range. If there's a desire to push that, we can push that as well. One of the things I think that helps from our standpoint is we do have all the trades, the architectural, as well as the engineering in-house to help expedite that process.
Construction, the actual construction?
Actual construction for a project like this, I would say is 12 to 14 months, especially if you're looking at a couple of stories. One thing, advantage here is the buildings, the site's been cleared, barring any unforeseen conditions below site. Of course, as we're going through initial design, we'd be doing test forms on the site, things like that, having site surveys done. You may already have some of that in place, but I would anticipate a 12 to 14 month construction schedule.
In previous projects that you all have worked on this size, what has been the average cost of your services, meaning design, bidding, and management, as a total percentage of project costs?
Total percentage, typically is in a 9 to 10% range for something like this. It varies depending on whether we're also doing interiors in terms of doing interior design, furniture, things like that. If we're doing old civil engineering, some of those things. There are other things, working with security systems and communication systems, things like that. That can push it a little bit over to 10. If a lot of that stuff is civil engineering is being provided by someone else. Some communities have a civil engineer on staff, or they have a relationship with a civil engineering firm, then the fees may be on the lower side of that range. And what we typically like to do is work through the schematic design, get through at least conceptual design, so we identify, really define the project, and at that point negotiate a final fee in terms of doing the final design. I think it's more fair for you as well as us, because everybody has a better understanding of the requirements for the project.
What are you seeing today as the typical, that would be the typical cost per square foot on similar projects of this size and scope today?
There's a dangerous question. Anywhere from $100 to $500 a square foot. That's for an answer. I've been burned on that question before. In all seriousness, right now, I don't have a police station currently under construction or out to bid. I've got a number of fire stations. I think costs are somewhat similar. Apparatus bays tend to drive the cost of a fire station maybe a little bit lower because there's a lot of empty space there. But right now, we're seeing those typically in the $275 to $300 square foot range. We have one up in Perrysburg, a little more involved, a little more site work involved. I think it's up maybe pushing $325 a square foot. So, unfortunately, costs have gone up over the last year and a half, 2 years as we've come out of the recession because of the trades. There are a lot of people busy right now. And sometimes that simply drives the cost up.
What is your average percentage of change orders on similar projects?
We range typically, I don't know if you guys have any better information, usually 1 to 1.5%, maybe 2%, depending on the complexity of a project or if there's unknown site conditions that you uncover.
And what is your average percent overrun on budgets of similar projects?
When you say over, you're talking about based on the original budget? I don't know that we really have overrun. We typically try to include a contingency to cover change orders. The critical thing is, as you're designing the project, is maintaining good cost control in terms of the estimates. We've had pretty good success with that. We do some cost estimating in-house. We also have consultants that we work with who provide us good cost information. So typically our projects come in within the budget.
You mentioned a little bit of this, but how will you incorporate the memorial and monument as well as other green space areas into the design of the building and site?
Well, I mean, I do think it's a logical thing to think about the site and the building holistically at the same time. You know, one can reinforce the other. So, for instance, creating that sort of a green space is a forecourt to your building, as an entry kind of sequence through a Publix or a plaza. That's normally what happens in those plazas. People, a lot of times, like Mark said, there isn't anything there. So we create the plaza, and all of a sudden that becomes the logical place to put memorials. So you have the memorial, so essentially the one's right on that corner. So I think almost any of the concepts we showed, I didn't see any reason why that would have to go anywhere. Obviously, the other one sits more back on that alley. I think just from a public accessibility standpoint, it would be good to somehow get that redesigned into some green space of the site that is easier to access, whether it's kind of through the lobby of the building that comes out on the backside, or whether a couple of those concepts made that plaza in front large enough. There's really no problem at all incorporating both of them in that plaza. So I think just knowing you have them and to consider that all in the design of the outdoor space as well as the enclosed space.
How will you incorporate new technology and energy-saving products while keeping the project within a given budget?
You want to handle that one?
I'll start that anyway. A lot of times now, it's difficult not to design a building that responds to sustainability, reuse of materials, because a lot of the products that are used in the construction industry have been tailored to that end. But our company practices sustainability as just a course of our design. Our building that we work in is a LEED, I think, silver building. LEED gold. I think it started out LEED silver, ended up being actually a LEED gold building as a renovation. We typically, even if we're not trying to achieve a LEED sustainability credit for the client, a lot of times we're asked to, and we do this, we'll design a building that's what we call certifiable. So we'll actually document things that we have incorporated into design that would be sustainable type products or goals. We've even in the past documented that with with information that's available to the public. And
I mean, obviously, we do LEED. Eric, you probably have the statistics on how many LEED projects we've done.
It's a lot. It's more than 50. I mean, annually, 50% of our work is designed to meet LEED certifications.
So it's just a natural part of our process. If you want to try to, push that more, we're more than happy to do that. We have the higher sustainable projects. It's a little bit, occasionally you'll get to a point, if you want to go sort of beyond kind of the standard, probably silver is almost what we do without even trying. But if you wanted to push that a bit, it might have a teeny bit more upfront cost. And if you want the plaque on the wall, that there's an upcharge for everyone to do the paperwork to be able to get the LEED kind of certification. But we certainly can do that, and it's become a natural kind of process in our designs.
a large portion of our work is federal, and with the federal projects, typically we are going for LEED Gold on those projects as well. As far as incorporating technology, we typically work with, when you get into the data communications, alerting systems, and communication systems with the police department, we typically work with the vendors and with our client. A lot of times that's information that's being provided through the vendors, and we coordinate all that effort to incorporate it, make sure everything works in the building, is fit into the building, and coordinate on that.
Describe in detail your needs assessment process, including stakeholder input, which will ensure a building design that meets our current needs and provides flexibility for future use.
I kind of alluded that in the presentation. We start with questionnaires. We have a questionnaire, and as I was saying that, I realized I didn't bring that with me. We have a variety of questionnaires we've developed over the years for public safety as well as administration. So we do have a police station questionnaire, police department questionnaire, and we have an administration questionnaire that we provide and submit to the client at the very outset. Ask them to get that information, fill that out, and provide it back to us. One thing I've found by doing that, and I always encourage this with our clients, is that it's not just one person filling that out based on what their thoughts are. You actually engage your staff or engage a committee to coordinate and put the responses to that together, because it gets you talking before we even get engaged among yourselves as to what your needs are and what your desires are for the project. We get the questionnaires back. We then prepare a preliminary program of spaces that we bring to the initial meeting. Along with that, we have the room diagrams that I alluded to. These are every single space in the project, whether it's a janitor closet or a training room or a squad room. We do a preliminary layout or maybe a couple different options of what that space might look like. Various size offices. A chief's office is going to be a little bit different size than a lieutenant's office or an administrative office. So we have room diagrams that delineate that. By doing that, we're able to communicate with you what we think you need, but also respond to what you tell us that you do need. Those room diagrams become very instrumental in creating the right sizes that go into the program, the summary of spaces. We then apply what we call grossing factors for circulation and building infrastructure to get a preliminary look at the size of the building. And we've been pretty accurate in predicting the size of the buildings. Once we get done with that, then we go through we get to lay out the building and design the building.
Well, and I might just want to chime in too. We don't just take the information provided through the questionnaires. That's only the starting point. It helps to get a jump on it, and for you to get your group to start to think and start talking. But then we sit down individually with we'll get with the city manager, for instance, whoever you have assigned as sort of the lead, and then we'll see which are the groups we need to talk to, and we'll actually then we'll go through that with a fine-tooth comb. We bring information from our past experience that maybe you guys just really you didn't have to think about. You think you may need these 3 offices, but when we challenge you a little bit and say, you know what, in this role you've got the opportunity now to do things in a different way because we're designing, a new building that can make you work now as efficiently and as positively as possible, and then you get people kind of say, oh, I never thought of that, and that kind of thing. So that initial information from the questionnaires is only the place to start.
Right.
And then we sit down and have very intimate one-on-ones with various sort of user groups and involved, we have to think about from a hierarchy standpoint, who all you need to be involved in all those different meetings. And until we get really to a program, that's a final program. Then we know how big the building is.
And the other thing we do too is, and I mentioned before, is we tour what your facilities are now, how you're working. It's very helpful to see what doesn't work as well as, a lot of times in the discussion with somebody who's sitting at their desk that doesn't work, you get a lot of input, a lot of insight into it that way. We typically do that right at the outset as part of our initial, our initial kickoff.
Again, the other thing that we do sometimes is, as a group, we may go and look at other facilities early on. And maybe it's some that have been our project, but that's not as important. It's just looking at what we know is a good project, and maybe you, as administrators or politicians in the community, you may know of other communities, people you know in other areas, and you've seen certain things in those other buildings that you say, wow, this really works well. And sometimes that's a good thing to do too, because you've been working in your own little world for a while to go and to see, maybe some new facilities and walk through the back of the house and really see all those things. So that's not a bad thing to do early on.
The other thing I'll point out too is those room diagrams, excuse me, they become part of our documentation of the process because they help validate, help you take a look at how we've responded and make sure that, that's what we talk about doing, or maybe that's not exactly what we had in mind. So that's where I talk about being interactive, but it's also documented. So it becomes part of the documented record of the project. Later on, once we have all of that set and we're getting into the design of the building, we also prepare room data sheets for each and every room. It identifies the proposed finishes as well as equipment that's going to go into rooms, special mechanical, electrical requirements for each individual space. And the other thing it does is identifies, when you talk about equipment and furniture, it identifies who's providing it. Is it going to be owner furnished, or is it going to be part of the contract document? So that it again becomes part of the documentation to make sure everybody is on the same page as to who's going to provide that under-counter refrigerator in the break room to make sure it's there the day that you open. So it's very methodical, documented, interactive process to make sure that everything's set.
Again, so after we have the square footage, excuse me, from the historical data, we can just get a ballpark of where we are, order of magnitude from a cost standpoint, without even having drawn anything. You can get a general kind of a feel. But then normally what we would do is start to do some diagrams like I just showed you, involve you in that, but start looking at options. Is it really all one story? Is it whatever, any type of ideas or configurations, and you test it. You don't go through this exercise, but once in a lifetime probably. So you want to look at what are the possibilities on the site. That's an important part early on. Excuse me.
How will your quality control process limit change orders, ensure quality construction to bid specifications, and help bring the total project cost to completion out of the projected budget?
We, at the outset of the project, as we're moving from the design phase, actually even before we start that, because we also do some review at the schematic design phase, we identified an independent technical review team within the office. So it's basically a peer review by people who are not involved in the project. Typically, those are senior level people, or discipline chiefs are involved in that for each of the various disciplines.
What about once construction is underway? Tell me about your site visit process.
We have, typically, it's, I call it tag team. We have a senior member of the firm who heads up our construction administration. If he's not involved on a daily basis, then the project architect would typically follow through on that. A lot of times in a project like this, it's very helpful to have the project architect continue through because he knows the product, and he knows the design of the building, he knows what was specified, and as it goes through the shop drawing review process, it's important for him to be involved in that. With a project this close to us, I always like to have the project architect involved on a not daily basis, but available on a daily basis if need be, but typically once weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings to meet with the contractor and tour the site, and then have that senior construction administration person as a backup, and periodically visit the site as well. And then we also have our mechanical, electrical, and structural engineers available at strategic points of the construction, before drywall goes on, before the ceilings are installed, to review the mechanical, electrical systems, make sure they're installed properly as well.
Final question. Describe the style of building that you would see fitting into the site, keeping in mind style of commercial buildings that are in close proximity.
Hopefully you
Well,
talk.
we're, you know, hopefully if you look at any of our buildings, they all look different, you know, so what I take pride in is to come up with an aesthetic that is unique, you know, for you. I mean, that's a building like, a city building. So we're going to, to work with you, kind of about that. You certainly have a certain scale and a character to the community, and I think a city building wants to to feel right. It doesn't want to look like somebody just dropped a spaceship in the middle of your community. So it needs to feel right for Dayton. So I don't like to go into any project from the beginning with a preconception, because we want to work with you guys as a collaboration. I can anticipate it wants to lean a little bit more to the traditional side than a super sleek glass and steel building, just because of who you are. You're in a river community. I kind of understand river communities. I'm active over in the neighborhood of California on the other side of the river, so I live in a little like a river community. So you have your history, you have your, and we're going to immerse ourselves with you in the community, and that's where some of the public input may be. Maybe there is a brainstorming sort of session early on or whatever, but our goal is, and I feel like I've done my job when I come back, when the building is all done, and I have the people in the community who come up to me and say, oh my God, I can't believe this feels just right, for us. And that happens. So, and that's when we know we've done our job right. So, again, don't like to come in with a preconception, but you certainly have a character and a feel, for your community, the location of the site, 6th Avenue, and we would want to make sure that it's compatible. It is a public building, so it may be, you want to to raise the stature, Usually when you're in a community, you can tell which of the buildings are kind of the public buildings versus a commercial type of a building. So it does want to, I think without a sign on it, you want people to kind of drive to it and kind of say, I'll bet you that's the City Hall, So it's kind of a nebulous answer, I know, to what your question is, but that's just how we work.
Council, anyone?
On your 4 concept designs that you had up there,
Yep.
I noticed you kind of took up like the whole front of all available land. What size buildings were those, square foot wise?
This is I'm thinking it was about a 20,000 square foot.
About what?
20,000. 20,000. I mean, I don't really know for sure where you're at with your program. I forget where we came up with that. We had kind of a feel, I think, for where some study that you had done before.
There's probably actually a second part to that, and I'll let Joe go ahead and ask his question about your lot design.
Two-part. What about going to 3 stories to reduce the footprint? Police, administration, public meeting areas on the 3rd floor.
It's certainly a possibility that we had done that.
Okay.
So obviously,
That would reduce the footprint and
it
save the
would
green space.
reduce, the footprint, stairs and elevators have to go longer and so forth. If the scale is right, if it's going to feel right in that location, it's something to consider also. But we've done a number of buildings where, the actual kind of the council chamber, occupies, the top kind of in the middle. And, you just have to think about all the logistics of it. So for instance, if there's going to be a mayor's court and so forth, this is things we don't quite know yet. If you're going to need to hold, if you're going to need to transfer any, prisoners up a back way, and it's a little bit longer for them to do that. You just have to make sure you've covered all the practical issues.
Well, the top floor would be the least often used.
Yeah.
The other question I had was the location, quite frankly. And I know from past conceptual designs from 10, 12 years ago, and the ones that you showed, they're all planted right there at the corner. What about moving it to the far east end of the lot, using because that's pretty much 9,000 to 10,000 square feet footprint, just going to the curve. And that way you would have the parking, memorials, green space if need be, all out towards the west.
So you're,
This is here, you can see it better here.
so you're talking about over here?
Yeah, I did a quick link GIS. Pretty much from here down to this corner and over to this lot line, just taking that is close to 10,000 square feet. So if you were to go to 3 floors, you could take up half of that. That would kind of hide this building, which isn't architecturally significant, and would still leave all this green space and parking and area and everything
Well, like
out
I
here.
said, after we come up with the program and the uses, we would do, there are times when I've done 20 of those quick sort of concept sketches that tries to address any kind of potential way that you could organize the building on the site. And each of those options is going to have the pros and cons, so there's sort of a list of the criteria. There's certain things about efficiency and the ability to get, the police where they need to be, and the aesthetic, pros and cons and so forth. And, it could be that it's all over on this side, or I see what you're saying though, because then we keep the green on this side, we would certainly investigate that.
And the sight line towards the church.
Yeah.
Well, which leads to my other question. Normally in projects like this, when you're dealing with small municipalities, we don't have a large staff, okay? During the programming phase, who do you normally get involved? Because I know if you just involve Michael Giffen, he's going to have a 5,000 square foot office and his own bathroom. But what kind of a group would you involve in that?
We've gone the whole gamut. I think when we worked with Iowa Pump, we talked to everybody. And they were a little bit larger than you. I think they had probably 10 staff. We actually had individual meetings with each council person. We encourage as many people be engaged in the project as, especially with a community your size or an administration your size, as many as possible. If you're dealing with a large city, that's not practical. But I think with a staff your size, that's why I alluded to, even with the questionnaire, get everybody involved in it. They know as well as anybody, maybe better than anybody, how the city functions and what the needs are to be able to function with the city, or as the city administration.
So it's usually a committee of not just employees or administration, correct?
We've actually done that too. We've had committees that had, or worked with clients who had community members who were part of that design team. I'm trying to, it seems to me there was,
It's almost like a unique situation for each community. You know, each community really is unique. In the organization of your administration is kind of unique in each community. So what's one of the first things we'll do is we'll work with you to kind of, to design, if you want to call it that, an engagement sort of process that again is unique for you, you know, knowing who your players are and so forth. It's usually good to have, you know, one individual that is sort of a, you know, conduit.
That point person.
Right. So you make sure that, you know, the information flow needs to stay, you know, kind of, you know, in a clean thing. You don't want, after you talk with this big group of people, you don't want this admin person over here to give us a phone call in the middle of the day and say, you know, I really do need a bigger office. You know, so you got to have a certain hierarchy in who it is you engage and but I think Mark's right. As much as possible, we would meet with, you know, the size of yours, you know, at least, you know, the main individuals, and then there are times when we share the information at certain times with everybody. And even the, you know, the community, you know, how much do you want the residents involved in the city? You know, we could have early meetings before we design anything and just do, you know, a site analysis and talk about the potential and have a block, you know, have a physical model on here and have a block. This is this square footage, you know, what are the things that are important for you on this site? You're going to hear things like green space probably and memorials. And so, you know, it kind of depends on.
So committees do work if it's organized and managed.
if it's organized, yeah, one thing I've always, with the questionnaire, I always encourage, like I said before, get everybody involved in putting that questionnaire. But the critical thing is I only want one questionnaire filled out and sent back to me. I've had a fire department one time sent me a stack of questionnaire. Everybody filled one out. I couldn't even tell who the fire chief was. And that was, so from that point on, we said return one completed questionnaire. So it's, we work with you. You know your community, you know your staff better than we do right now. Hopefully, as we move forward, we'll get to know everybody very intimately. But I think it's important for you to be comfortable with the people that you're putting forward and that we're engaged with in terms of working through the program. And that's staff as well as anybody in the community that you may want to bring on board.
Understood, thank you.
Anyone else from council? Yeah. Ben?
About how many products do you have going on concurrently, this size or larger, I guess?
In
Not
terms
typical, I
of,
mean, I know every day changes.
in terms of our local government projects that we're working on, that I'm working on, Dave's working on, we have right now probably, I'm going to say about 6. Several of those are actually under construction right now. We're in construction documents right now for a fire station project up in northern Ohio. We have a couple of, we're just getting started on programming on a couple others. So we've got projects at various stages. I'd say right now, you know, company-wise, we probably got a couple hundred, but we have 65 people and a lot of the people working in the private sector and others working on federal projects.
That's a nice question. How the staff size at KZF is 65?
65, right? I think that's the current number. 65, combination of architects and engineers.
And we would have a dedicated team for our project?
We've identified project team members in the program. That's who we intend to use on the project at this point.
Okay.
The project, this project fits well within our workload right now, and it'd be a very good fit. Because once we get done with that fire station project up in northern Ohio, that'll be going out to bid sometime in February. Those people will be becoming more available to be able to move in a project like this. Timing is perfect.
No, my question.
Anything else?
I just wanted to, no, not at this time.
Come on.
Thank you for
Didn't realize this.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Again, we appreciate the opportunity. This is I did say it before, we have a leak behind Eric will pass that. I'm going to avoid shaking hands with people because it's cold. I'm hopefully almost able.
I guess we both got it.
know he's. But one thing I wanted to say before I did not.
Talking too much.
I think this project fits what I call Dave's and my sweet spot in terms of the type of project, size of project. This is a project I really enjoy because you really try to background. It's a good sized project.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We take a break.
Yeah, 10-minute break. We'll be back. 10 minutes.
Shake your hand, but.
Yeah, we saw you talking.
Hey,
You don't want to shake your hand. I don't know where your hand is. See you tomorrow. I really did at the casino.
I got pineapple Indians and Pakistanis. And they
Back in session. Okay, obviously we'll just dive into a discussion here. I don't know, I mean, I've got my thoughts and views, but probably best served to turn it over to you all to make some comments and discussions that you will have regarding how those two presentations went, how you felt.
What are, I guess, what are you looking for?
We're looking for a motion to take one of these two architects to go forward.
And is that to sit down and
Start
negotiate?
Yep.
This would allow us to negotiate.
But let's say there's a part of the well, let's just say the fees, for instance. If you can't negotiate them to get down to a better set of fees,
We come back to council.
then we come back to council, we can change it, and get on with somebody
Yep,
else.
that's exactly right.
So what we're doing today, I want to make sure Denny, I kind of have the same concern. We say, yes, let's go with A or B today. Let's just say it's B for whatever reason. And they come back and say, well, you know, that project's going to be $30 million. And we're going to say, okay.
Then we come back to council.
Or even if it's going to be $1 million.
Right, we come back to council, we
Let me-
say, here's where we are.
Let me clarify. So what we would do after tonight, it would allow the mayor and myself to sit down with whatever firm we go with, just to enter into negotiations for some sort of contract for design and their services. We would bring that contract back to you at a later date for approval. Now, that contract could look several different ways based on some of the information that I heard tonight. There could be a fee for just getting to the portion where they can tell us what the building is going to cost. And then at that point, there may be another contract after that that would enter into a contract for the rest of their services. But whatever we brought forward next would come to you all for approval. This would just allow the mayor and I to enter into some negotiations to get something on paper to bring back to you all. And if it came back and the terms don't look good, they're too high, we feel like they're too high, you know, we can switch directions and go with the other firm.
Well, let me ask you this, is there any way that, I guess the whole thing really, that we're probably, one thing we're looking at is, naturally, their fees are based on the total construction cost. But is there any way that we can't negotiate with both of these companies at the same time to get their fees? Because I think that's going to be the stubborn part of the whole picking of the company, because I think they're both fair companies. I think they both put on great presentations. But there are some steps in one that's out of line.
Procurement actually requires you to do it one at a time. So you had to do one, get to that final line, you guys will approve or deny the contract. If you don't like what's negotiated, when it comes back to you, if you say no, then you say go enter negotiations with the next one. But that's,
I guess what I'm saying is we don't really have a comparison to go with. You know, like if they come back with a fee How are we gonna know if that's gonna be the best fee we can get for the job?
Should be a bid type language, shouldn't it?
No, I mean, no, so I understand what you're saying, but what you're ultimately deciding on tonight is what term you feel comfortable enough doing the job that we move forward with negotiation. You can't dictate, we can't dictate price at this point, we don't know, they can't even sit here tonight and tell us what the price is gonna be.
Right.
We need to, there are some questions that need to be answered for them to figure it out. For instance, I think it was KZF that mentioned that instead of maybe giving us just a dollar figure right off the bat and said this is what our services would cost, they may say this is what our services would cost to get to a certain level before we would determine the total project cost. Am I right in saying that, Eric? Was that something KZF said? But, or they may come back and just say this is the fee. And in either way, we would bring that back to you all and say this is what we've come up with and this is the plan. And it would be up to you all at that point to decide if that was, I mean, we as staff have resources to be able to vet the pricing to see if we're getting a good deal. It won't just be left up to, our word to say this is a good deal. We'll come with sufficient backup on how we arrived at whether the price, we think the price is in line, too high, or a good deal.
Michael, I have a question for you. What disturbs me is this first company that was going to be here tonight, and that no-show, no response. They took the opportunity to give us a brochure and everything, and all of a sudden they don't even no show, no call, nothing.
Yep, I'm a little frustrated, obviously.
Did you call them?
Well, I checked by the time that they weren't showing up, the meeting was started, so I checked to make sure that they hadn't reached out to me, running late or anything. I hadn't received anything, but they had responded to the same correspondence that KZF and GRW did, so they did the information.
And prior to this meeting, you called them and told them what time the meeting was done, what time their time slot was, and everything. They just did no show.
Yep.
So, I mean, the companies were very similar in nature with their responses and their answers. There were a couple variances that I found interesting. The design fee for GRW was about 5.5%. KZF was 9 to 10%. That can be negotiated. I understand that, but that was kind of one thing. KZF, and maybe because of their locale, said they would be on site a lot more frequently than GRW, which I like that because I can tell you, being involved in school facility projects, your site manager being on site frequently is a prelude to the success and keeping the thing on budget and on cost. So I did like that. But I thought both firms did a really good job. And in terms of quality control, those room diagrams are interesting. I think those are very beneficial to have in terms of that kind of feature when you get into the actual construction and the finished project, in terms of this is what you did design. Our room diagrams show that. They show the size, the layout, those kinds of things. I like that. I kind of like the way the guy from GRW though described that this is the gateway of your community to the waterfront, that kind of thing. And I like the way he described the traditional kind of touch of the building with some contemporary highlights. So I kind of like that. So there were different things from both that I did like. So, I don't know, it's going to be a tough decision.
I can tell you this, that I know KZF is sitting there, but I know it's only concepts, but I didn't like any of the concepts they presented. I really be honest with you. I thought they took up too much space there. We wasn't utilizing what we want to have there. Now, with that said, that was a concept. And so I'm not going to hold that against them. I agree with Jeff in the fact that I like what GRW said about our road front, but yeah, it's going to be a hard sell from. It's not going to be a hard sell for either one of them. We just have to understand that We're just making a decision of who we want to go in negotiations with. That's the bottom line.
I had KZF right top on my score sheets when they went out. And I didn't really see anything that would move the needle in my eyes that would push one further over the other, given their locale and the other things that Jeff said. In addition, it seemed like they were more receptive to having community input to the project and the creative process of it, so I kind of like that idea as well.
I think we all kind of, for the most part.
I think 5 of the 7 had been ranked either first or tied for first
James just got everybody.
during the initial score.
Everybody's cooked up here.
You ready?
I'm ready, buddy.
My main concern here is, as you know, the speed of this whole thing. And so many questions that we still have to answer financially, the whole 9 yards. Looking at the 3 presentations, the time frame from signing the contract to putting out bids in these presentations. CNC, which is out of the running, had 30 weeks, okay? KZF had 32 weeks. GRW had only 20 weeks, which I think is far too short of a time frame. I think because this is a controversial issue in the city, we have to be very careful how we do this. We have to take our time getting a lot of input from everybody so that everybody feels at least a little bit satisfied with this if we do go forward. On that, because I feel they are the most cautious in getting that programming phase correct and getting the feedback of the surveys from different people. On that regard, I prefer KZF. I'm with Bill as far as the designs. I don't like that crowd in the front like that, and architecturally I don't think it's that right, but they're only concepts.
Right.
Out of the 2, I honestly, you know, KZF has done great work for us down on the riverfront. GRW, we don't have experience with them as far as an end result yet. I know they're working on the sidewalk project, but we still haven't seen how that turns out. I prefer KZF of the 2.
Want to make a motion?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I'll make a motion, we go with KZF.
I'll second.
I think we have to be careful how we word this.
Well, I was gonna say negotiate with them and bring it
Enter
back.
into contract negotiation.
Sure. How's it worded?
Yeah, we'd like to entertain a motion for the administration to enter into negotiations with, in this case, KZF, to work out a contract that we will bring back to council.
Michael, can we make that for the design phase?
Yeah, so you're saying enter into a contract to look at the design and keep the bidding and construction separate?
Yes. Yes. You want to do that?
That's fine.
Yep.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call. Oh, comment, I'm sorry, anybody have a comment on?
And this will be brought back to council to be finalized.
Yes.
Right.
But in the interim, before it comes back to council, who's going to be involved with KZF? Do we have a committee on this, or is this you?
Nope, so I've started to formulate a committee. It has not been finalized, obviously we won't have to wait until we got through tonight, but I will be in touch with you all to finalize that. We want some
Will that
input.
committee go before
Okay,
council?
are we talking about negotiations or design?
I was looking at it more in terms of design.
Okay, I don't know if that answers
Understood.
your question. I don't know what your question was.
No, the negotiation's on administration. I'm talking about, because if you tell them you want a 5,000 square foot bathroom, you're going to come back with a big bill.
Understood. No, so I've already started to piece together a committee. In order to finalize it, I want your all's input, but it won't just be administration. So.
Okay, good. I'm excited. And will it involve any citizens or board members, or?
It sounded like tonight that people would be in favor of that. So right now, I just kind of pieced together some council members, and I thought,
And we'll put some
but I haven't reached out to anybody yet, so it sounds like it will go beyond council.
Will that come before council, or will it just be,
I mean, I'm just more looking, I'll just get an engaged interest on who would want to serve. Obviously, you can only have up to 3 council members serve on it at a time. So we have an idea of who, I mean, we'll reach out to all 6 of you, but We started to piece together maybe some community members and council members we thought they'd be interested, but I'll reach out to all of them right now to figure that out. It's not set by administration.
Understood. And I understand that the pricing negotiation is, we're
Yeah,
assigning that to
No one
administration.
assigned.
But because it really determines what price they're going to come back with, again, I get back to the 5,000 square foot bathroom. I'm taking it to an extreme, but everybody's going to want a bigger cubicle. And I think as a council, we need to decide, as a group, we need to decide what's best for the city.
Absolutely.
Any more comments? Any more comments? None? Roll call.
Member Volter?
Aye.
Member Burns?
Aye.
Member Neary?
No.
Member Baker?
Aye.
Member Haas?
Aye.
Member Lynn?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So ordered. Need a motion to adjourn?
I don't know if information to make a.
Motion by Jeff. Second by Danny. All in favor? We're adjourned.
Aye.
We're adjourned.